in-person lessons. Um, we'll still have to leave the room at a decent time so that way the next class can come in. So when we're lecturing, say in Cranert G16 and 13, even if we want to go longer, we can only do that outside of the classroom. So 10-20 will still be our cutoff, just so everyone knows. So
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I should have specified. I meant like when we do the virtual discussions, because we're all online. For those of you who want to stay longer, we can, and you can ask me questions. I'm also going to try to make myself at least virtually more available to look at your portfolio, because it's a big thing. Is I get it. Like when I was a student, I was really afraid of just getting a job. And by the way, I think I started recording. Yeah, it's recording now. I was really afraid of this concept and, like getting a job and that I picked the right thing. And I come from, my sister's a pediatric ophthalmologist. She went to Yale University. My dad, though, was out of work for many, many years, and he was a city worker. My mom was a city worker. So we had this fear from being poor as a kid that we had to be at this level where we all became doctors. And I went to school for pre-med and I fell in love with art. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm totally cool with this concept of being a broke, poor artist. And thank God it ended up just being that way for a few years after college, but I ended up being okay. So anyway, just a little bit about that. So the next thing is I want you all to work on being more active on Microsoft Teams. The reason for this is there's that old adage, iron sharpens iron. You're only as sharp or as strong as the person next to you. Brentley and I are sort of your support structure for this course, and many of you will probably come back, and I hope you do. Like I have this adage where you're always a student of mine, regardless, and I'm also a student of yours, to be honest with you, as sappy as that sounds. So I don't cut people off, whether I switch schools or I stay or whatever. But you don't know how to, you need a team and you need a good group of people to work with. So post art, even if nobody responds, post your code, talk about things, share knowledge, sort of grow this little community at Purdue, because we don't have a center where you can go, where you can all interact. So we're gonna have to settle for a virtual center until Brentley and I can build out that center. And as you all kind of come into the class, try to remember to mute your thing, because Brentley and I believe we can mute you, but there's 140 of you in here, so it's kind of hard to catch, who to mute. Okay, the next thing is we're going to take a quick look at both Shad and Stan's IMDb's, because I want you to come up with some questions. These are people I've worked with in the past who are some of the greatest. Thank you for requesting to join the team. I'm going to add you in, right after class. That's awesome. They are amazing. So they're amazing human beings. They're very generous. They've come out with tons of course material on the internet out there on how they do things. And they're phenomenal in their own right. They have no need whatsoever. This is an old demo reel from 2016. I'm going to mute it, but this is Shad's old reel. And I'll see if I can run this at the fastest speed possible, but just so you get an idea, of just the quality of work that, he has as an animator. And this is somebody who can model, who can rig, who's taught courses at Columbia College with me in modeling and rigging and animation, and just a phenomenal human being. So just to give you an idea, think about questions that you can ask them later about well, what was your mindset, or what were you going through when you animated certain shots, or what's it like working at Pixar, or, and both of these people, if we look at Shad's IMDb, these are just a few films. They don't even have all of the movies that you just saw in his reel, but look at all this stuff, that he's worked on. And in contrast to if we look at Stan's demo reel too, oops, that's the, here's my buddy Stan. And he actually, I called him on the phone the other day to ask him to do this talk. And he had so much wisdom about, because he's, I was talking to another student in class, and I won't say their name because I don't want to feel uncomfortable, but Stan comes from a family of very smart people. He was originally a student at University of Chicago, and I'll let him tell him his story, but just a very talented, well-rounded, amazing, not even just 2D artist, but 3D artist too, as well as somebody who has a passion for NASA. And so I'll let him tell a story. And he's got a lot of cool movies that he's worked on too. So, and what's nice too is he's got this thing of going between 2D and 3D and, you know, just all over the map. So I want you all to kind of like think about, like, be a little selfish in your question asking on, like, how can you get here, right? Like, what was it like working on Mike Tyson's Mysteries, right? You know, or was that like the highlight of your career, or was it Venture Brothers, or was it Sonic the Hedgehog, or is this just a fuel for these people to get to what they want to do, like create their own films, things like that? And then before they jump in, I wanted to talk a little bit about my own experience with becoming an artist, and I'm going to do that right now. So I remember getting to a point in my career where I was working in games where I wanted to move over to film. And so I talked to Disney. Let me move this over for a second. And I applied for a job at Disney feature film. And they said, you know, you're not strong enough yet to be at our feature film, but we think you'd be great for our TV and commercial house. And I was like, that's fine. I'll work my way up. This is totally cool. It's not a big deal. So they gave me an art test. Well, they said, you know, we want you to recreate a Disney character. So I recreated a Disney character and I sent it to them. And they said, well, we were looking for something. Let us be a little bit more specific in our art test. We want you to take 2 characters and we want you to match them together in a style that's different than the Disney style. That was their art test. So I was like looking on the internet, and I was like, I've always had like this love or this passion for like Greek sculpture and, you know, a lot of the Italian sculpture, stuff like that. So like you could see like, here's some really cool centaur stuff. And I just remember seeing stuff like this or like this, which was really beautiful. And I was like, well, how can I mash this together? And then I happened to be watching Fantasia, and there was this scene where like this centaur comes and then there's like this big conflict. I don't know if you guys remember Fantasia. There's this big conflict between them or whatever. And I was like, you know what? It would be kind of cool to take a centaur from there. And there's always this inner struggle with the Little Mermaid and sort of mash them together. So I created this piece where it's like the centaur is almost kidnapping Ariel, the Little Mermaid, out of the water. And so I made this, like I was in this world of games and what's it called? And so I had like done this like low resolution model, and then I had done this like ZBrush sculpt on top of it, and I baked out all these normal maps. And it's kind of an older model, and I don't have it set to Arnold, so it's not rendering the edges where the UV maps are. And they loved it, but they said you didn't follow directions, and so we can't offer you the job. And I was like, what do you mean I didn't follow directions? They said, you did this beautiful piece. It's really nice, but we told you we wanted you to make it for film. And you made another video game piece. And all my experience was in video games. And I was kind of like heartbroken. I was like, oh, so should I send you the ZBrush model or whatever? And they said, no, you know, we're going to introduce you to this person and, you know, work with them for a while. And we actually ended up becoming really good friends. And then I realized after talking to him, I didn't want to work in Disney TV because it paid less than games and it was 10 times more work. It wasn't like the feature film house. And actually, that's another question for you all, if you have for Shad, is what's the difference between Disney and Pixar, right? Because they're now this marriage. So anyway, my kind of takeaway for today is like, you will get art tests. I'm going to show you all some art tests that I've gotten in the past or that I've given to students. But like for me, I ended up not getting this job at the time that I thought was my dream job because I missed one important step of the instructions that they had sent me. So any questions about that at all, about the things I talked about or this little art test?
We have a question from the room. I'm gonna go ahead
Oh,
and
in the
ask.
chat, yeah.
Okay, so so the question is basically regarding Disney Interactive. Just to sort of put this on the timeline here. When you got like moved into Disney's game department, was that Disney Interactive at the time, or was this something else? 'Cause, you know, Disney Interactive's not around anymore. Sort of, what was that situation? Sort of, what were the internal politics of that?
For Disney Interactive, I don't know. I think the reason they shut down was to me, it was about money. I'd have to look it up. I just remember, Stan, I just saw you pop up. Did you work on Guilty Party with me? Were you there at the same time on High Voltage?
Don't think I worked on Guilty Party, no.
Oh, okay. So
Hi, everybody.
what was that, Stan? Sorry.
I said hi, everybody.
Oh, okay. So what happened was, I remember I worked at a studio called Wide Load, and they received the third party. They started receiving third party work from Disney Interactive. So Disney originally, when their interactive studio started, they weren't doing a lot of their own work. They were farming it out. They weren't making anything on their own. So we got the contract for Disney's Guilty Party through High Voltage. Shows going back and forth between a studio called Wide Load, which was owned by the creator of Halo, and Disney Interactive and High Voltage Software. The second they bought that Wide Load studio and Wide Load had offered me a job, Disney had made a lot of bad decisions in respect to creating IPs because they started infusing a lot of television and film things into, and I'm only speaking for my experience working with Wide Load and why they shut down. They started treating it like it was a film house when it really should have been run like a game studio, which has different economic barriers as well as timelines. And so there was a lot of back and forth in that. And then all of a sudden, Disney's like, we're hemorrhaging money here. Like, they didn't realize, like, when you make a film, here, let me mute this for a second. When you're making a film, like, there's a certain timeline and there's a budget for this thing that isn't necessarily an interactive experience, or like the events, like we talked about events in game design last class. The events are already hand scripted inside of this world, but you have to kind of create the events in the game, or allow students or allow the player to create events. And those events are what are fun and what make money and make a game profitable. So anyway, in my personal experience, it was a lot of poor decisions and thinking like a film house versus a game house. So I'm gonna open the chat up too. I'm like, having used Zoom for 1,000 years, I still kind of, yeah, the celebrity is here. Stan is here. Stan's like
Celebrity. That's bread and butter then.
Yeah. Let me send a quick text to Shad, and then I will start the it's funny because last time he was on before me, unless he's here. All right, I'm gonna Stan, I'm gonna start with you until Shad jumps on.
Okay.
Unless he's in the you can let people in the meeting, right, Brad? Brentley? If they can't, or that's on me. If for whatever reason he can't get in.
I don't notice any kind of like messages popping up about it.
Oh,
So I
he said he's
yeah, I think anyone can just join, but I can be wrong.
Oh, okay, cool. He said I'm ready. Oh, sorry, 1 second.
You should be able to just click the link and then it will take him in, I think.
Yeah, I didn't get a meeting thing.
There should
there
be
we go. Hey, Shad, what's up, man? All right, so
How's it going?
good. I would do for your view, everyone, do speaker view, and so that way you can kind of it sort of defaults to whoever's kind of talking. All right, so we looked at your IMDb's a little bit, and then we scrubbed through your websites. So this class actually ends at 9:20 our time, Central Time. So what I was thinking is I was gonna grill you both for about 30 minutes, give the students a little bit of time for 10 minutes, and then let you go. So so I guess I want to start with and just because you're on the left, Stan, and I'll move to Shad. So this class, just to kind of give you an overview, is made up of it's a technical art class, which means like they get a little taste of everything and how it relates to Unreal Game Engine. But the advice you give is in any way you want is really, I find, like the same for designer, programmer, artist, in the sense is like your passion, the time commitment you put into becoming like great artists and animators. So my question for you, I guess, and both of you can, or either of you can answer, I guess it doesn't have to be a thing. It's like, what made you initially want to get into, I guess, art, or pick this as a career? Like, how did it start?
Shall I, Shad?
I've got an answer, but Stanley, if you're raring to go for it, man.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll just in case my kids come back early from the park and everything goes cuckoo. Yeah, actually, I really didn't want to end up as an artist. That was sort of an accidental career for me. I was aiming for physics, for astrophysics. I wanted to be in space science, and I actually fought my artistic impulses for a very long time. And it really wasn't until I failed to succeed as a scientist that I said, well, I guess I've got art. And then slowly over years, came to terms with that identity and got better and better at it and invested more and more in it and found that I really enjoyed it and loved it. And though probably in a way that's maybe a little different than the way people who say set out to go to art school and this is what they want to do, you know, for me, it was more like an exercise. Like my whole career, I still view this way, and it still informs all my projects, is an exercise in honing visual communication in the service of ideas that I want to communicate as a storyteller, as somebody who's interested in science and public policy and writing and developing science fiction and promoting certain causes I'm interested in. So I kind of view working in entertainment and getting good at being an artist as sharpening a tool set that is still ultimately in service of a much larger set of interests that I have. So, yeah.
Stanley, the failed scientist,
That's right.
successful artist.
Yeah. You never know what, you know, skill set is ultimately the one you really have. And I could probably do science now if I started again, but you have to take years to figure out how you learn things. Sometimes it takes a long time to learn how to learn. And you're not often, sometimes your first interface with a subject or with the way that you start to learn something can be very, very counter to the way you actually process information or how you ingest information. So I recently revisited calculus just to see if I could do it. And I was like, oh my God, this is 1,000 times easier than when I was trying it in high school. Why? Oh, because I'm 37 and I know how my brain works and I can take this at my own pace. And okay, you know, so it's yeah.
And you had gone to like University of Chicago, right? And you'd gone to these
For just a year, yeah. So in high school, I was part of something called, I was involved in something called the NASA Student Involvement Program. I developed 2 autonomous payloads that flew aboard the space shuttle Atlantis and Endeavour with a small team of nerds. And that got me into the University of Chicago program on the physics track. But I just found that once, you know, there's just a few too many life factors going on for me to really be able to, you know, deploy all my faculties and do it right. And that's just, it's a very monastic sort of focused thing that you have to be able to do physics. And so I ended up dropping out and switched to film. Actually, I ended up going to Chapman University in California and ran out of money and didn't have a degree. So I made a bunch of short films and then came back to Chicago very frustrated and with a lot of debt and no degree, and moved in with my dad and said, okay, well, what can I do right in front of me right now? And so I just spent a year studying super hard at concept art and building a concept art portfolio. And I built a ugly, terrible little portfolio that got me my first job at High Voltage Software. And
that makes me feel really good that my portfolio, if it's an ugly portfolio, and I worked there. Well, I guess that's a good sign to everyone that you don't necessarily, or your ugly portfolio might be.
It wasn't great. I mean, not by my standards today. but nothing ever works like that. But it was enough to get me, like on a project at high voltage, doing environments. And so then I used having an income and driving out to that exurb every day to that crazy place, and use that time to put in countless hours at the library with sketchbooks to just develop the skill, push it further. And at the same time, develop my own projects and interests along the way. Yeah, I mean, I could just tell the rest of the story of the career. I don't know how interesting that is, but that's, at that time, that was pretty much a couple of years out of college, right? So I did that. I was simultaneously very much wrapped up in something called the Space Development Steering Committee. This is like a small think tank of policy advocates for space development. Bob Zubrin and Buzz Aldrin and a bunch of people were on it. And so I was doing a lot of pro bono, like engineering sketches and designs for these white papers and proposals while doing video game stuff. And then eventually I rented an office in Chicago and went freelance, quit high voltage, did book illustrations, did concept art for board games and video games of all sorts all over the place. I think I did some work for Wide Load at one point, even a little freelance on the side for high voltage. And it was a challenge too, because working at high voltage is particularly difficult because I don't really play video games. I'm not terribly interested in video games broadly. I think there's like a dozen video games I've ever played, and I play them just because they're like the best ones. Like, well, I should read War and Peace because it's War and Peace. It's like one of those. Like, I just picked like. I tend to wait like 2 years between playing whatever the next thing is. Like I think I just recently played Elden Ring because it's Elden Ring. Like it's clearly an event. So let's play Elden Ring and learn something. But yeah, I've always been just kind of a books and film and nonfiction person. So I then did a Kickstarter, raised a bunch of money, and made a short live action film while I was doing freelance in Chicago. It was a pitch pilot short demo thing for a miniseries I wanted to create, a sci-fi miniseries. It's called L5. It was super low budget. It was just a proof of concept attempt thing, and but we made it. It got into Comic-Con. It got into all these festivals. We were talking to William Morris, all sorts of stuff. But then times changed, development cycles changed, and that kind of petered out. And so then I got a job at a place called Fable Labs in San Francisco. So it's a startup. And it was during that time that I got very frustrated that I was constantly getting pigeonholed into doing environments. And I was getting pigeonholed into doing environments because, frankly, I wasn't very good at drawing people. And so I decided that environments are not a useful communication tool for everything that I want to do. I'm much more interested in, drawing audiences in through stories. And so I got to learn how to draw people, appealing people. Like I want to learn how to do all that, great character design stuff. And so then slowly, with a lot of intense late night study and effort, I began to focus back on not just anatomy, but good character design and all that. And now I'd say my portfolio is much more heavily leaning in the character people direction.
Well, I wanted to ask, because
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, like, I have a question
Sure.
a little later. So hold that thought, because I wanted to ask, what are you doing now that's different than then? Like, for example, like, so if you could hold this in the back of your mind so I don't forget,
Mhm.
like you
Yeah.
mentioned the character stuff. Were you tending an atelier? Did you just draw on your own now, or like you did before? So hold that thought, because I'm going to come
Yeah.
back to it. I want to ask
Sure.
Shad that same question.
Yeah.
But like, because I love, that's a big thing, is like, how do you grow as an individual, as an artist through time? So like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
hold that
certainly.
thought, because I want to come back, if you don't mind.
No, go
Shad,
for it. Yeah.
start with your kind of origin story of where did you go to college? Why did you go into animation? So
Cool. This is awesome because Stanley and I don't know each other, so it's just as interesting for me as it is maybe for the rest of the class. So cool. Yeah, I have lots of stories. So like Stanley, I didn't like animation or art when I grew up. I did not want to be a scientist. I thought I was good at math until I took pre-calculus and failed miserably. And then I realized I wasn't good at math. So I was not the Saturday morning cartoons kid, you know, that woke up early to watch Looney Tunes, or I don't know what the cartoon would be nowadays, but I did not do that. I watched Roseanne and Home Improvement because my mom watched those. It's kind of embarrassing, but that's what I ended up watching. It wasn't until like high school. There was a day in high school that I came home and there was an episode of a series on TV that just hooked me. And that episode was Dragon Ball Z. Kind of embarrassing, but for some reason, I don't know why, them, you know, spending a half hour to power up per episode in one pose, I just really loved, and it for some reason really appealed to me. So that kind of made me want to be the natural transition from Dragon Ball Z would be to anime, right? So then I wanted to be an anime artist, moved to Japan. It was a terrible idea because Japanese artists are amazing. They also speak the language, which I don't. And they work 16-hour days and get paid very little. So I'm glad.
There no portfolio. You just thought you were going to get a gig, or just.
Well, I researched. I thought that I was going to be like a teacher, right? Because that's the American way to go to Japan, is teach English, and then and that's how you get money. And then, you know, so that did not work out, which I'm very thankful for. I applied to a school called CalArts. This isn't an animation group, so you guys probably won't. I'll skip this story, but it's like the Disney school. Normally, this is when I would say, any questions on whether I got in? I did not. They sent me a nice rejection letter, which I have right here. And I keep hoping that they're going to ask me to be a speaker so that then I can send them back their rejection letter. No, I'm not that bitter. I really don't have it right here, but yeah. So then I went to a school called the Art Institute of Phoenix. It was not a very good school. We knew it as like the McDonald's of art schools. So there's one around every corner and they're not very good. That's how we knew it. It was a very, I kind of appreciate it a little bit more. It's a very typical kind of brick and mortar school. But you know, from there, it kind of helped me appreciate Disney animation a little bit more because I had really just loved anime. And so all my characters had giant heads and tiny little bodies. And I thought it looked normal. So it helped me grow as an artist. From there, I interned at a place called Fat Cat Studios, and I worked on Curious George, which was pretty awesome because it was one of the last 2D animation films that existed.
That was your first job, right?
That was my first job, yeah.
What was your portfolio like to get into that first job? Sorry to cut off the stream. It's just that there's so much gold in both of what you guys are saying, that like cherry picking the things for them, the amount of work, the portfolio, like how much work did you put into that portfolio? What was that portfolio?
Yeah, so that's a story, and I'll definitely jump into that. So the way I got into that studio was, it was next to kind of my school. And so I had researched the studios that were kind of in the area. This was Phoenix, Arizona, while I was in school. And I saw that there was a studio called Fat Cat Animation. So I just went there and I just showed up and I was like, hey, I'm an animation student. Can I get a tour? And they were gracious and nice, and they gave me a tour. And so I kind of remained in contact with the owner because it was a small studio. So he was there. His name was Len Simon. And I just maintained contact with him, and I would always send him my work when I was at school. And eventually, like the last year of my school, I became an intern at that at his studio. So I just spent the last year, and I remember it was funny because he was like, he said while I was in school, he's like, yeah, when you graduate, just come to the studio and we'll give you a job. Or wait, he didn't say that. See, that's what I remember. He said, come to the studio and we'll talk about whether, you could work here or not. He said something that was a little bit in between, but in my student brain, I took it as I have a job after school. And so I graduated. I had a decent portfolio. It had like a few 3D, it was still mostly 2D animation. And then it had a few 3D animation pieces, but the 3D animation pieces weren't very good. I think I have that reel somewhere. If you ever wanted me to send you a link or somewhere, I could show it.
God, I would love that. Yeah.
So basically I graduated and then I showed up to the studio and I said, hey, I'm ready for a job. And the guy's like, he's like, what? And I was like, oh, you remember our conversation? We said that after I graduated, you'd have a job for me. And he's like, oh, it's like, okay. And they were right in the midst of Curious George. And he was like, well, he's like, I think animation's pretty much done, but he's like, why don't you go around and talk to all the supervisors and see if they need help? And so I went to the animation department and they were like, who are you? What? Like, no. And I was this little kid and these people had worked in animation forever on Disney and all of that. And here I am, this little punk kid, like walking around being like, hey, do you need help? And then so I went to all the departments and the same answer. It was like, wait, who are you? No, sorry, we don't have any help. But then I went to the effects department and the effects department was actually slammed. They had way too much work and very few people. And I was like, hey, I was this junior kid and I was really excited and eager to do work. And I was like, hey, I can help you. And they're like, oh, okay. And I think the supervisor just took pity on me. So he gave me one drawing, one in between. And he's like, why don't you try this and we'll see, if you can do this. And I spent the entire day, 8 hours doing one in between on an effects shot. It had to be like cleaned up. The studio, like the line that we drew actually had to be like a cleanup line, which is why it took so dang long. And so the first day I only did one drawing and I think it got approved. And then I just kept showing up day after day. And I wasn't getting paid for the first 2 months. And I just kept going in and working until finally the supervisor came to me. He's like, hey, are you getting paid? And I was like, no, man, what's going on? Like, why am I, where's the money? And he's like, you're actually doing a lot of work. You should be getting paid. And so then he took me over to the owner and Lynn Simon. And he's like, hey, this kid's doing a lot of work. We should, get him on the payroll. And then that's how I, got my first job. So I basically just showed up to work, kept working until they paid me. So
that's amazing. And both of you kind of created so Stan, you mentioned too, getting into high voltage though, you just grinded for an entire year on drawing. And then how did you create your portfolio to get the Curious George job? Was it more just your, because you said it was mediocre education. So I don't know if you guys know this. I was Shad's teacher at that school in Arizona, and that's how we met. I'm just joking around. But you mentioned, you're like, no, you weren't. Like, no, you mentioned the school was not strong, and did they provide you with the set of skills? If not, like, what did you do on your own to prepare, or was it not necessary for that particular position?
Well, I was a particularly motivated student, and I would say my school didn't really like me. My school had, I don't want to encourage any of you guys to do what I'm doing. This is just, I'm telling you my story. My school had 3 animation classes and I knew I wanted to be an animator. And then there was a whole bunch of classes that weren't related to what I wanted to do. So I just said to the school, I need more animation classes. I'm not taking any other classes. And then they just, I bugged them until they kept giving me animation classes. So I took way more animation classes than any other student. I think I had almost like 3 every quarter. And I would just retake the same ones. Even the instructors kind of hated me because they wanted me to do the assignments that were part of the class, but I'd already taken the class and I would just end up doing my own thing. And because I was somewhat, I was very motivated and had a lot of animation compared to a lot of the other students, I kind of got away with it. So even though it was like a mediocre school, I think it was self kind of driven. Yeah. So I had a lot of animation at that point.
And every successful person I know did what you and Stan did. Like, I went to Columbia when we had to learn soft image, light wave, 3D Max, and Maya, and they were like 4 different. And by the end of it, I didn't know anything except like the basics of these programs. I didn't have anything, so I had to grind for 2 years after. So I feel like everybody grinds. Like if you're not grinding on your own, like there's a saying that it's like true professionals. It's not necessarily that you're getting paid for it. It's just that you get up every day and you're excited and you do it. Maybe the excitement part, we all get burnt out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think some younger students think that like they're going to graduate and get a job, and at least with animation, for the most part, that's not the case. Like I went to a technical school for 2 years, the Art Institute of Phoenix for 4 years, an animation mentor for 2 years before I got my first 3D feature. So that's 8 years of education, and I was highly motivated. So I think that's something that a lot of.
If I could interject on that
Yeah.
thought, I would say that generally speaking, if you regard your experience at university as training wheels for the level of investment that you will need to sustain for the rest of your life to get anything at all, then you're ready to like understand what's up. Like university is not to set you up and prepare you like, here it is, you know the stuff, now get a job. It's rather going, this is how hard you should be working and thinking about everything you're going to be doing as soon as we let you loose. It's supposed to kind of spool you up, so you're like, oh, all right, this is how hard I'm going to be pounding the pavement, this is how hard I'm going to be working, and honestly harder. It's kind of like it really is like you know, like when you start up a turbine, right? You know, it's just that first bit of hot gas that gets the turbine spinning. That's university. Then you have to go, okay, it's spinning, now I got to add some throttle and get this plane going down the runway. And so, you know, yeah, I mean, that can take the form of courses, taking ateliers. I did an écorché class, you know, on my own, you know, sculpting, and all the Gnomon videos, you know, that you end up just consuming. For me in particular, because I kind of take everything from a weird first principles sort of approach. I just spent countless hours reverse engineering anything that I was looking at that was interesting, and just trying to understand very deeply, like a fundamental level, what made something good and what made something not good. Like what was the real difference between something that, you know, looked, you know, commercial, industrial, entertainment grade awesome versus, you know, something that I would run across on DeviantArt or Tumblr or whatever. Like what really was the boundary condition, and understanding that deeply. And that came, you know, you do master copies, you do anatomy study, you do everything you can rather consistently. And this is true of any field, right? Like my best friend is a ER physician, and he still has to take tests constantly and keep up to date, you know, just to get certified. Like, you know, this is fighter pilot stuff. Like you got to be on top of it all the time, and how you stay on top of it is interest driven, and the truth is that you will always kind of feel like you've got too many lines and they're all falling out of your arms, right? Like, oh, but I really want to get good at writing, and I want to read Robert McKee's story and understand story structure, and you know, oh geez, but man, my design thinking stinks. Like, look at that artist. How are they getting these lines that are just so right? Like, what the heck? Okay, I got to get a design book and read it cover to cover and copy the drawings out of the book. I'm going to be doing that for 4 hours tonight after you know, I'm dead tired. Oh, geez, really? Like, there's new software? Is that the direction everything's going in? I got to learn that. Okay, well, download the software, open it up, start breaking the box. What does it do? You know, like start clicking around. Like, it's just kind of always on it. And so, and depending on, you know, like I'm pretty scattershot, so it took me a long time because I'm very interested in everything.
Mm.
And so I just had to piecemeal accumulate lots of stuff over time. And yeah.
That adds to my second question. So like there's the portfolio that you both created to get your first gig. Then there's the portfolio you get to get you to leave your first gig to get into the major studio.
Yeah.
So like you mentioned a little bit, which is awesome, like the level of work you're doing. So I'm assuming when you said you were exhausted and then you spent 4 hours after work, this was the portfolio you were creating to get into a feature film house. Is that correct? And then like same thing for you, Shad, like what is the portfolio that you did to get to the next level, which is Pixar? Was it the stuff from Animation Mentor? Like, so I'll open it up for both of you to answer, but, and then there's the third portfolio, which is the one you're always working on now to make your dream come true. It's kind of like Maslow's theory of hierarchy. I was talking about that last time in class. Your first portfolio is what keeps you alive, just to get you food and survival. Your second one is to kind of keep you becoming an expert. And then your third one is what allows you to reach your creative potential. So
And
like
it
I'm at
stops
the
being a
second
portfolio
point
at a
now.
certain point too.
Yeah. So what is
So
this
like,
the thing that you did to get you to a major studio? That's the second portfolio, is I guess what I'm saying.
Shad, if you want to answer that. 'Cause
Yeah. So after working on Curious George, I wasn't good enough to get into 3D features. And so I went and worked at a game studio. There was a local game studio. I talked with him and I didn't want to work in games. Games aren't my thing, but it was the only job I could get. So I went and I worked there for 3 years on a game that never came out. And I did a cycle per day. So Stanley, who's a mathematician, how many cycles is that for 3 years?
oh, sorry. Just texted me. So I didn't even
No
hear the
worries.
setup. I'm sorry.
Seven cycles.
So yeah, they're
Yeah.
about,
Wait,
about
I'm not
900
a mathematician. Yeah. 900 cycles.
that never
That
came
Did it
Yeah,
out.
make you
yeah,
worse at
because-
animation or better?
I don't know if
understand
it-
calculus. I can't do arithmetic.
So a lot of cycles. So to kind of harken back to the previous point, to get my next job, the only way I got it, because I was a working animator at this point at a game studio, right? And a lot of the other animators that were there were completely happy. I wasn't happy, so I continued my education, and I think this is something to keep in mind, that like it's a never-ending thing. So if you don't like what you're doing now, you're probably not going to like. It's not like it changes from school to work. Like if you want to be successful, you just have to keep pushing and pushing, no matter what studio you get to. At least that's what I found. So that's what I did kind of throughout my career. So I went to the studio and said, hey, you know, I want a further education. There's this new school. It's called Animation Mentor. Will you help fund? Will you help pay for it? And they were really gracious, and they paid for half of it. So I was able to go to you know, Animation Mentor, while the game studio that I was at would pay for half of it. And that's ultimately what got me a reel that was good enough to get my first feature. It kind of backfired on them a little bit, because I went to this school and it got a really good demo reel and then left the studio. That they helped me, you know, they helped me pay for that education. But yeah, I didn't end up using any of my professional work to get that, you know, the second level tier. So that's maybe something that's interesting. Like I didn't use my Curious George stuff. I didn't use any of my game stuff. All the stuff I used to get my, you know, to get to that better studio was stuff that I had done on my own or at the school. And yeah, so that's kind of my story.
Yeah, and I was just showing them a piece that I did. So I applied for Disney feature, and they said, "Hey, you're not good enough for Disney feature, but you're good enough for." I don't know if you saw the model I showed, Stan.
Yeah, I saw that. That looked nice.
Yeah, thank you. It's like they said, "Well, we have Disney TV and we have Disney product, and we think you'd be pretty good for the commercial house or whatever." And so they kind of gave me this art test or whatever, and they ended up failing me on it for. I'll share with you the model another time, shit. But it's like they didn't failing me on it because I didn't follow directions. But one of the things they did in my portfolio is I had applied with stuff that I had done, some of them from High Voltage or whatever, and they're like, "We want to see." Like it's almost like, don't show me what you do during the daytime. Like that's your job. Show me like, you know, like the true quality of the character of the artist or the human being is what they do in their leisurely time.
Yeah.
All the jobs I got, Sony, Pixar, it was all based off my own work and not the work that I did at the previous studios. That they could care less, partly because they don't know how much your hand was held by, you know, someone better than you. They don't know if your supervisor went in and told you to do this pose and this pose and this pose. So
That's
Yeah,
gold, because I actually didn't know why I mean, I know some of them were awful, but that's a good point. I didn't actually know why they're like, aside from this little quote that I came up with, is like, I was like, why are they so hard on? But yeah, I didn't realize like it is, you're right. Like, and I was kind of handheld. Go ahead, Stan. I'm sorry. I kind of
no,
cut you.
no, not at all. But that's so the point you're making is so important. You know, as somebody in a position to make hiring decisions, and you know, I review portfolios rather often. You know, there's two kinds of, you know, portfolios that I see that get a job, and they're these are also very rare portfolios to run across. And Shad, I think you'll probably agree, right? That like you see hundreds of portfolios, and then of those, maybe 10% are going to fall into either of these two categories of like, okay, I might hire you. The first is the competent technical artist. Oh, thank goodness, you have baseline floor of general artistic skill. I can put you here or put you here, and over time, you'll probably figure out what needs to be done. And I know that my production isn't going to drown because there's a floor of just basic artistic competence. You know, you've got composition, you've got construction, you've got anatomy. Oh, wow, you actually bothered to learn all the basics of art. Thank goodness. Like that's category one. And then, you know, it's not necessarily explosively creative or anything that really is inspiring, but is at least like, you go, this is competence I can work with. I can start you somewhere. You're going to fix a problem for me for the next 3 months. And then, so that's like 70%, 80% of that 10%. Then that 20% is someone where you open it and you go, okay, this isn't a portfolio where, say, someone has nicely and neatly laid out, these are my prop turnarounds, and these are my character designs, and these are my storyboards, right? Like, which is a nice thing to do, but you just go, it's a freaking artist. Like, there's something going on here. There's a light inside. I'm being drawn in. There's a voice. There's a depth of humanity. This is an observer. It's an interesting person. I want them around. For me, selfishly, you know, like I hope we can get them. That's the rarest kind, and that person gets hired as well. That person, in my book, very, very consistently gets hired because you can also tell that they're smart enough to do the baseline competence stuff when it needs to be done, but you're also just excited to see their take on things. You can see them. Those artists are also more likely to get creative buy-in on what's being done. They're not just going to be told what to do. Those artists are the ones that get hired because you're going, you know, there's like a whole sequence where these people are fighting and there's this crazy thing. I just want to see what you'll do. I just want to see what you're going to come up with. And I know it's going to be interesting, and maybe I'll have to like rein it in over here or there, but like, let's see what you got. This is crazy.
And
Those
you
people
brought
work
up,
very hard.
yeah, and you both. So really briefly, if you need to step out, it's 9:20. I know class is over. You have to run to another class. If you want to stick around, how much time do you both have, Stan and Shad? Do you guys have 15 minutes? 10 minutes, maybe?
I have another 25 minutes.
Okay, I'll just do 10 minutes. Is that okay with you too, Shad?
Mhm.
Because I have one question, and then I wanted to open up to anyone who has a question. On a piece that you're currently working on, or it could be on a current piece or a past piece or film or whatever. What is the most challenging thing? And it could be from when you first started, whatever, that you did, and how did you handle it? Like, what did you do? And if you need a minute to think about it, it's fine. Like,
Like
I can give you an
personal?
example from my own life. Like at Amazon, they asked us to do some New World animations or whatever, and we had no direction whatsoever. And what's it called? It was like a sword swing and an attack and all this other stuff. No direction. The art director was new. He actually had less experience than he was like right out of college. And so yeah. So anyway, it's something like that. That would be the great example. How would you handle, or if you worked on Buzz recently, Shad, if there's anything challenging in there?
Yeah, I don't know if this answers your question, but I guess what I'm dealing with right now is that because I teach a lot and I teach these principles and I tell the student, like, come on. And in the back of my mind, after I, close the Zoom, I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with those students? Like, why don't they get this? Like, I'm telling you guys, don't share this. But then what's funny is I'll go and I'll do my own work and then I'll get notes, like the exact same notes that I'm giving to my students. And I'll be like, and then I'll go home and I'll be like, I know this shit. I teach this shit. Why am I still like making those mistakes? I don't know if that's just with me because I'm dealing with this issue right now. I assume that it's probably not just with me, but even like once you learn something, you probably still have to refresh yourself with it and remind yourself, oh yeah, okay. I got to make sure. Yeah. So
you'll always make the same mistakes, just a little less than the student will.
yeah.
Like fresh out of the box, person is going to make the mistake like 90% of the time, and I make the mistake 10% of the time, but it feels like I'm making it 90% of the time because I shouldn't be making it anymore. It's like a sort of thing.
Yeah, I had a shot where literally the character, it was someone making contact with another character. So I think Buzz was being like held on and a bug comes down and grabs him. And I did this. I did the fatal mistake of the bug goes down, Buzz doesn't move at all and then grabs him. So there was like no contact. He didn't push him down. And like that's something that I feel like, come on. It was a very rookie mistake where someone pointed it out and I just like slapped myself like, God damn it.
What was the situation that you were in that made you miss? Was it time constraints? Was it exhaustion? Like what made you make
miss
this
that?
rookie? Yeah, what made you miss that?
I think it's just the amount of things that you're thinking of. I think what happens as an artist is there's a lot of things that you don't think about anymore and they happen in your subconscious, and you just I guess you pray that you're ticking off the boxes like in the back while not thinking about them. And I think sometimes you just kind of skip some of those. At least that's the way I think of it. So like when I'm animating a shot, I often don't think about like bouncing balls now or like the basic things. I'm thinking about like, how is this shot going to come off? What's the energy? What's the flow and stuff like that? And I'm just praying that, in the back of my mind, I'm ticking off all of these boxes. So I think it's just the amount of things.
Are you, because I want to work on because I know you make short films and a director, and I'm totally going to text you after. And Stanley, this might interest you too. He makes these beautiful films that he submits to festivals.
Oh, awesome.
Do you find that your work in your personal work, do you push it further than the work that you did on Buzz Lightyear? And the same thing goes for you, Stan. I know you make personal work as well. Like, is your personal work kind of higher priority or is it the same?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, right now, because of the show I'm on, Pantheon, it's kind of a dream job for me. So I'm putting a lot of heart and soul into this particular job, because it's hard science fiction, anime, dramatic for AMC. So it's like it's tickling all my interests. Awesome. And long form, chamber drama, people talking, like it's cool. But the hard sci-fi part, sort of answer the earlier question real quick, just has been very challenging because I was brought onto the show as an assistant director, and then they changed my title to visual development director because of the work I was doing, which is really just kind of a little of everything. And so the hardest part actually has been the fact that I'm kind of the only person on the show that is as interested in the subject matter to the degree and detail that I am. And so I find myself rather constantly running up against like, things coming in from other artists, designs, ideas and whatnot, where, we're going for Ghost in the Shell and I'm getting Ben 10 all the time, right? Like, because just the interest isn't there. And so I'm writing like PDFs, like how to think like about, technology, or how to think about, making these documents, trying to explain like, um, you know, uh, uh, these sort of like fundamental design processes for how to think about the future, because it's a futurism show and it's supposed to be very realistic.
Hmm.
And the talent in animation, which is very talented, a lot of it is a lot of these, artists and people who come in, they're Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles people, they're SpongeBob people, they're Ben 10 people. They come from that kind of world and thinking.
And that
And,
reflects in their work. And that's
it reflects in their work and in their creative choices and in what they're even capable of imagining. So like I'll ask, like, okay, we need a design for a high bandwidth satellite that's, delivering uploaded intelligences point to point on the planet, and it has to look believable. And then I realized, oh, I'm the only nerd that cares about phased arrays and, solar folding and all, like, geez, I have to design it. I got 3 different designs and they all just look like really conventional, kind of cartoony satellites that are a big departure from reality, and are like, the mark we're trying to hit is like, Evangelion level sci-fi, Akira level sci-fi, something from Satoshi Kon, and like, Japanese animators, I don't know, culturally or whatever, they're just very curious about like nature and technology. They have that inherently in their design thinking, and a lot of US animators are very creatively inbred. It's just, inspired by the pastiche of the Instagram post of the Instagram post of the thing. And it's like, guys, like, I could just Mid-Journey will do a better job coming up with something interesting than this. And
when it's come down to AI being the one to create the art.
no, and I often will just open up Mid-Journey and be like, I'm just going to ask the AI because I don't have time, and it's going to do a better job than kind of the designers.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, okay, think more, read more, everybody. Be more curious and interesting.
So I have 3 questions because we're kind of going over time. I want to kind of make sure that I can get to some of these, and then I'll let you guys go. We could even break it up, whoever wants to take the question first. But the first one is, what variety of items should be included in your portfolios? More so, what do companies want to see in a portfolio? And I guess you could just speak for your specific studios because it's such a broad question. Do you want to take this one, Shad? And then the second question, Stan, you could take the one after that one if you guys want, just to piggyback them.
Yeah, this will be quick for animation. It's going to be specific to animation is what I'm talking about. But you don't want those demo reels that say modeling, rigging, texturing, and where you break it up. You just want your name that at the beginning and end for a second or 2, no longer than that, and then show your best animation, your next best animation, your third best animation. I wouldn't make it longer than 30 seconds, maybe no longer than a minute. Absolutely not. People will only watch 10 seconds and they'll make up their mind after that. So you may hear people say, put your best shot first, then your second best shot last. No one's ever going to see your last shot. Every time I've looked at demo reels, I never get to the last. So yeah, just put animation. Animation, it doesn't matter if it's rendered, it can be play blast. I've known people who have gotten hired at Pixar for blocking animation because the people that are hiring can see like, oh, this person obviously knows how to animate based off their blocking. It doesn't have to look pretty either. It just has to be good animation.
And actually, I'm going to lie for a second. That was because you handle storyboard artists and 2D artists and all this other stuff too. Can you answer that question too, Stan? That's my lies. Like, I was like, Shad, just do this.
Sure.
I think it's such an important question. That's an awesome response though. Thank you, Shad. Especially the blocking part. I'm like, dang, dude, I didn't know.
Yeah.
My answer is going to be pretty similar. I mean, yeah, okay. Like if with storyboards, for example, keep it short, keep it to the very best clips. I just don't have time to watch the whole thing because yours is one of 100 that I would have to review or, whatever. And so I just want to see in that first 10 seconds, Do you know what you're doing? Are you good? Did you put a lot of effort into this, and does it show competence? And if I can see that right away, that's going to be your best bet. And again, specificity. Apply for specifically the job you want. Don't give me a generalist thing. If you do give me a generalist thing, like it's because you're probably applying for a higher level position or a director position or something, and you're really just trying to showcase like who you are as a person. Then it better be some of the best stuff I've ever seen broadly, like that, where, okay, you're showing me everything because everything you do is freaking interesting and cool. But you have to have huge self-awareness to know when to pull that trick. And I can tell you right now, most people cannot pull that trick off. Do not. So just get your foot in the door with, I can hold hammer. This is the hammer I hold. Look how well I hold this hammer. Great. Go over there and start hammering. Like, just that's what we're looking for.
And that was a great response. Thank you. We only have time for one more, so maybe both of you can answer this one as well. And I think this is actually important because I get this with a ton of students. I don't know if you do too in your class, Shad. So the question is, how important is passion in this line of work? I'm at a point where it feels like I don't really enjoy making art or making models, and I'm just going to go along with the assignment. Am I going to crash and burn? Now, I want to expand on this because I had 4 people this week alone come to me and be like, I don't know if this is the line of work for me.
Probably.
So, I mean, it's a hard question to answer because it's personal, but it seems like I've felt at points where I'm like, I don't know, I want to do art. I don't want to teach. Like, is it?
I don't think any
Go
of
ahead,
us,
Shad.
for me personally, I don't think any of us will know if what we like at the moment is what we're going to like 10 years from now or 5 years from now. So I think the best advice I give my students is just go full on 100% with whatever you feel like at the moment. So if you want to be an animator at the moment, go 100%. And if 5 years later you change your mind, then you change your mind. I had an ex-girlfriend who she went to school for animation. She studied, she worked as an animator at the game studio that I talked about. And then we went to Blue Sky once at midnight and the studio was full of animators. And she's like, fuck this is not for me. Sorry guys, I don't know if I
No, you're okay. You're fine.
And she flipped her career completely and became a modeler, and now she models at Disney. So like that's what I would say. It's hard to answer, say like how important is passion. Passion is completely 100% important, but you don't know if that passion is going to change in the future. I don't think any of us do. So just don't like spread yourself too thin. I think students are like, oh, I don't know, so I'm going to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and that's what everyone does, and you don't get hired by doing that. So yeah.
Is that why you broke up with her?
Yeah, well, no.
Just kidding around.
many others.
Yeah, just do the ever living shit out of whatever's in front of you.
Yeah.
Just go. If you're flipping a burger, just holy moly, show us what you got. Passion is doesn't have to be isolated to the actual subject matter. So like if you're struggling to create, this and that because of school or whatever, just go, okay, well, how do I make this? This is the assignment. This is what has to be done. What about this process do I put my passion into? Is it just, do I set myself up for a challenge here? Do whatever, like, because that's the thing you're going to have to sustain for years and years and years and years, is just your like ability to be passionate about life itself. 90% of the challenges you're going to run into are not going to be anything to do at all with your job at all. It's going to take everything you have. So yeah, build that part.
Thank you guys both.
What I do part.
No, and that's a perfect excerpt thank you so much. I know you're both working on tons of stuff. You guys are awesome. Like you worked on all this stuff and taking time out of your schedule to chat is awesome. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Shad and Stanley. And hopefully the 3 of us can, if you have downtime, you're looking for something to work on, I'm definitely going to be hounding you, Shad. I want to work on your next film. The last one, it's in festivals now. Is it online anywhere? Because it's gorgeous from the link you sent me.
It'll be February. I think around February is when we'll release it online. But I have your guys' email, so I will be emailing you, Stanley, to help because I love your work. So
I appreciate it. I hope I can.
I actually grew a little bit even when I was working on others. All right, gentlemen. Thank you again. Thanks for those students who stayed after class, the extra 15 minutes. I hope you didn't make you late for the next one. They don't give them a lot of time to switch between running from classes. So yeah, it's all right. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye, everybody. You too.